Hey, welcome to the Ministry Mix podcast. We're bringing you real conversations for the souls and strategies of ministry leaders. My name is Phil Gifford, and our co-host Richard Pope today is absent, but in his stay, we have a special guest returning, Jim Collins. Say hey, Jim.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, if you're a seasoned pastor or just stepping into leadership for the first time, this podcast is for you, where we share stories, insights, and practical tips to help you lead both strategically and care for your soul. So each episode, we dive into topics that matter for your mission, your calling, and your own personal growth. Jim, it's exciting to have you back for a follow-up episode to all the things you did wrong, to give you an opportunity to talk about all the things that you do right. And the joke is, maybe we won't even publish this episode. We'll just leave the wrong one up there.
Just leave the first one and just let it hang.
Man, that failure, Jim, is all
this
the things.
guy.
Yeah,
this
exactly.
Guy.
No, in case you missed the first episode, this is the second part of a two-part episode with Jim, where we talk about a church plant attempt that he failed in, that closed down, and God taught him some things. This, we want to pivot over to the successful church plant he did, and really link the two, but like what the failures from the first attempt led to success in the next attempt. So we're going to go to lessons from a successful church plant today. So Jim, we get to be less like prying into like the insufficiencies of your soul and calling, and more into the ways God has been gracious and taught you. So
yeah, man, let's go.
And just in case you're wondering where Richard is, Richard had an unfortunate thing that came up, and he was not able to meet us here for the time of recording. He may or may not drop into this Zoom call. I don't think he will, but you never know. And that would be totally,
you never know.
That would be Richard Pope to drop in 5 minutes before our episode's over and
yes, it would
make some noise. So I will do my best to bring the unmatchable energy of Richard Pope into this conversation. But Jim, I'm sure you'll help too. So,
well, I was going to say maybe the two of us could combine our energy and get one Richard Pope's energy.
This actually might be a sovereign grace of God in this, because like the three of us together do tend to have a synergistic approach in how the energy multiplies.
Yeah, no doubt.
So maybe we'll actually get to finish this episode.
That's right.
On the topic planned.
Yes.
So, well, we just finished recording the first episode, but it's been once this gets dropped, it's been a couple weeks since you heard from Jim before. Just to review, in the first episode, we talked about Jim and his kind of, I guess, jumping ahead of preparation. Felt called, felt passionate, but jumped ahead of the necessary preparation. And God used the season of failing in a church plant to humble him, to get him back. And where we left the story was Jim was back in his home church in Orlando, kind of serving in a pastoral role there under some people that were graciously allowed to bring you in. Hey, connect the dots. What happened next for you?
Yeah, so it was several years after we moved back to Orlando, and honestly, kind of happy serving where we were, in a sense, minding our own business. But the thing that I always wrestled with, even as I was serving there, was still a love for church planting, a love for seeing the church multiplied, more churches being planted, and a real sense that in terms of leadership, preaching, teaching, that sort of thing, that really was where my gifts were lying. And so church planting was always on the radar in the sense of a passion for it, but God had graciously kind of killed off that idol of me having to be the guy. But I do remember several years into our time in Orlando, just reading through the Gospels, coming across Matthew 13, where Jesus talks about the kingdom of heaven being like a treasure buried in a field. Man sells all that he has in order to purchase that field. And not somewhere pretty close to that time, there was a large church planting conference in Orlando that I attended and connected with a good friend of mine named Bob. And as I'm talking to Bob, we're talking about church planting, talking about the gospel, talking about places that don't have a lot of gospel exposure. And he dropped Las Vegas, Nevada on me and asked me if I had ever considered Las Vegas. And I remember thinking, why in the world would anybody go to Las Vegas, Nevada, right? And So yeah, that was kind of what started this second journey into church planting, at least from a lead planter perspective for
Mm,
me.
yeah. So, just out of curiosity, like, give us a kind of a time frame. Is this 5, 10 years, two
Mm,
years after you get
yeah,
back?
it was
Like,
about 4 years after.
okay, and it just
Yeah,
for us, it just frames the healing and the
yeah,
adjustments. This wasn't like
yeah.
1 month later you're back
No,
at it. There's
no.
this is a substantial amount of time.
Yeah, and I remember a part of that healing process for me was there was a point in time that God had to bring me to be able to say if I never ever plant a church again as a lead planter and my only experience is failing in it, that's okay.
Wow,
That if the Lord has something else for me and I serve, as long as I can serve the Lord with my gifts and my abilities and my talents, however he wants to fill in the blank, I'm good with.
gotcha. So you still had a desire to plant a church. You weren't like a never or
No, but it was very much a Lord, I don't want to concoct this on my own. But Lord, if this is what you have for me, I'm fine to do it, but I'm also fine not to do it
yeah.
if you make it clear that that's not the thing for me.
Gotcha. So, man, what a good place to be is like, God, I'm in your hands. And it's
Yeah,
almost like whatever you want to do, I'm
whatever
your
you want,
instrument.
100%.
That's a pretty healthy way to approach all of our callings and positions and everything.
Yeah,
Hold loosely to the
hold it
sovereign plan of
loosely, man.
God.
Yeah, yeah,
So this friend Bob
yep,
came to you and said, "Have you ever thought about Las Vegas?" I love those church planting seed conversations. That's my favorite.
yeah,
Have you ever
yeah,
thought about planting a church? Have you ever thought
yeah,
about this? What do you think about this community?
yep,
So, what was your initial response to that? Besides not going to Las Vegas, the whole idea of like, hey, maybe now's the time to plant a church again.
yeah.
What was your gut thought at the moment? And then I have a pivot question.
Yeah. So gut thought at the moment was I got to talk to my wife.
That
Um,
was my pivot question.
yeah.
What did you think and what did Beth think?
Yeah. My first thought was Las Vegas. No, that seems a bit of a stretch. But I remember I went home that night from the conference, and it was a 2 day conference. So this is day one, and I just mentioned it to Beth. Hey, what do you think about planting in Las Vegas as a possibility? And she was like, Las Vegas, huh? And that was pretty much it.
Huh.
Like there was no real in depth conversation, and I honestly thought, well, that's it.
There we go. That's
Yeah, great. And in a sense, there was a little bit of relief in my mind because it was like, well, I don't really need to entertain the thought of Las Vegas anymore, so that's cool.
By the way,
And
that's a some maturing in you if because I don't know that original round Jim would have had that posture of
no, no,
If Beth's not in it, no, you didn't like, well, let me convince her.
oh yeah, yeah. And so yeah, again, a lesson learned in this is if God's calling me to something, man, I need to assure that I serve my wife well in processing this calling by making sure that she's seeing it, she's on board because she's got a wisdom and a voice to bring into this.
And I would say as somebody who's seen a lot of church planters super passionate about planting or ministry leaders super passionate about ministry leadership, there's a way that your wife can say yes to this calling. That's not actually a yes.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
We are
yep.
it's a hounded yes.
Yeah,
Um
and really
and it's
that was a lot
dangerous.
of our that was a lot of our first story is um she never said no, but it was more of if you really believe this is what God is calling you to, then I'll go.
Yeah.
And where this time I remember I looked at her when we started really to process through things and said, I never want you to say yes just because there's only one option in front of us. If
Mm,
you don't really sense this is what the Lord is in, then I trust you to believe that the Lord's going to speak through you to confirm his call for us.
gotcha. So when did that pivot from a to let's go for her?
Yeah. So next day, bro, this is so weird. So the next day, I go back to the church planting conference. Through my friend Bob, I get connected with a leader in Vegas, Vance Pittman, who planted Hope Church in Vegas. And I talk with him, I have a good conversation, and he essentially says, "Hey, if you're interested at all in talking about planting in Las Vegas, here's my card." I think he gave me a card right back in the days when we gave business cards. He gave me his card and said, "Reach out to me." So I went home, and my wife Beth, she said, "Is it weird that I can't stop thinking about Las Vegas?" And so it was at that moment
Wow.
when some of the dots started to connect. All right, the Lord's stirring in our hearts, and we have always had a passion for unreached places or underserved places. That's always been kind of a thing for us, and so then seeing this conversation about Las Vegas, then seeing that the Lord might be stirring in her heart a desire for that. That's when we started to get a sense that there may be something happening.
Wow. Okay, so you get a card, you get the business card.
Yep.
She's starting to say yes. From this point forward, how is the preparation process different than
Oh
the last
man.
preparation process?
So the first thing from there we did is we went to leaders in our church.
Okay. Yep.
and and
No more
we
surprises.
no more surprises. And we said, okay, we sense that there's an opportunity in front of us to go plant in an underserved place. It's Vegas, it's planting. Tell us what you see.
Hmm.
Tell us what you believe the Lord is saying to you in it. And we would even tell them, if you think this is a bad idea for us, you've got full permission to say, hey, we love you, but we don't see that the Lord is moving this way. And so again, by the Lord's grace, and we just think confirmation of the call, we got consistently the response of, we see church planting for you. Vegas was a surprise because we
Okay.
didn't anticipate that.
Yeah,
But
you
that
have, if I had
also,
to pick all my friends,
yeah.
Jim, you're a straight cut guy. Like I see a lot of places you thriving in ministry. Las Vegas would not be the top of my list, but
No,
I
and
wouldn't be for me either.
well,
So
and that's I think that's what a lot of them thought. But we also had so many of them come back and say, even though it was a surprise, we see it. It
mm,
makes sense, and so that was a significant part. And then another part was, we knew obviously we had to go to Vegas. We had to get an opportunity to see the
yeah,
city.
get there.
Yeah, and we needed to be assessed. We needed to also go to people who didn't know us and say, hey, we're going to submit ourselves and our story, our call. We're not going to hide anything that's happened in our past experience, and let you guys speak into if you believe the Lord's confirming this. And so we also went through the assessment process
The process
to,
that now you, in many
yes,
ways, and in the different iterations and
yeah,
development
yeah,
are deeply involved in.
yep, yep.
Wow.
And so we, kind of our mantra was, God, if you're in this, we just want to submit to you and trust that you'll say yes or no at every turn. And if you keep saying yes, we're going to keep walking. If you say no, we'll stop and we'll pivot wherever you want us to go.
So, through that assessment process, you're obviously unpacking all of the previous church experience because a good assessor is not going to leave that on the
No,
sideline.
100%.
They're going to be
Yeah,
like, "Let's talk about this."
yeah, yeah.
So how did all that stirring and conversations help you really flesh out this new calling?
Well, one of the things that it made so abundantly clear was, we were not the type of people that were going to parachute into a city, be there for 6 weeks, start something, and it just blow up.
Yeah.
We needed to go to a city where we had a period of time where we could just embed in a healthy church, get poured into, learn the city, get a sense of where the Lord's leading us. And so we needed a residency. We needed a season of training. And so coming out of the assessment, coming out of what we're hearing from our people, and coming out of the conversations with Vance and the team at Hope, it was like, yeah, we're not just going to come right away and do this. We want to submit ourselves to every training, relationship building opportunity we can have so that we can do this in a healthy way.
Yeah, that's so good. Because you're right, and largely you had the ambition in the first round, but you
Mm-hmm.
didn't do the assessment and you didn't really do the training.
Right.
You just
Yeah.
kind of skipped all of that. But
100%.
but I think identifying, yes, you have the idea of ministry leadership, but even church planting, the narrow lane of church planting, there is such a diversity in how a person plants a church. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not probably the guy that can parachute in, and I mean, I guess I kind of did, but but I'm not necessarily the natural galvanizer that's going to show up in a community and make 40 friends tomorrow that are
Right.
willing to just sell out everything to go do this. It
Yep.
takes me a long time to do that.
Yep.
I can lead
Yep.
people, so like,
Yeah.
so just finding not just like, are you called a church plant, but how has maybe God wired you to
Yeah.
lead in this? And that's true for
Yeah.
ministry leadership. So you're a ministry leader, just to pivot for a second to you. You might not have an official assessment process like a church planter does, or an official training process like the Send Network has, but all of your calling does require a level of where are you at, an
Yep.
assessment, and how can we equip you in the competencies and calling and character that you need to go forward into
Absolutely.
that. So
Yep,
so you were basically then incubated at Hope Church there
we
in Las
were.
Vegas.
We were.
What'd that training process look like?
It was there's no planting journey in Las Vegas without that experience that we had with Hope in a number of ways. One, just relationally being able to come in and be part of a church, knowing that we're not going to be here forever, that there is going to be a day when we leave and we launch out with our church, but being able to build relationships. And they were so gracious too. They would champion us, they would encourage people to go with us, and we took people from them that seeded our core team. So that was significant. We also went through just kind of a nuts and bolts training of how do you engage your community? How do you assess the needs? How do you start to really meet those needs and put some processes and systems in place?
Developing a vision for the needs of the
Yeah,
community you're planting in.
absolutely, exactly. How do you live like a missionary
Yeah.
and then start evangelizing, then start making disciples and letting the church grow from that? We hosted a small group in our home that was kind of made up of some people from the church, some people from the community, and then just kind of folks that were connected through different relationships. And so as imperfectly as we could, but as humbly as we could, we just came in and said, we're going to throw ourselves into Las Vegas, and every relationship that we come across, we're just going to try to mine for the gospel.
Mm.
And just, and we would tell the folks in our small group, like, hey, we're here to plant a church. The expectation is not that you're going to go with us. This is not core team meetings, like that sort of thing. But the Lord was kind that several families from that group that we just shepherded, they did become part of our core team when we launched our
Gotcha.
church. Yeah.
So you mentioned in the previous episode that you didn't have the visioning capacity to lead that core team originally. How did this process help that capacity be different?
Man, a significant part of it, I'd say in two ways. One, being around a leader and being around a team that really understood the connection of vision to strategy. Not that we didn't have that in Florida, but it
Right.
was. I think part of what
Different.
benefited me is Vance and his team. Although Vance is leading at a much larger scale than my capacity is.
Right.
I think it's there are some ways that we're kind of wired. Like he's a straightforward, like here's what it is. We're going to take this, we're going to do this. And there's just a clarity
Hmm.
that was really helpful for me. And then going through the training, what was so beneficial about the training is it pressed on me to say, okay, you've got to just really study your community. And as you study your community, what are you learning? What are you seeing? And then how do you take what you're seeing in your community and look at the gifts God's given you, the people that God's given you, and start to connect those two with the message of the gospel?
That's good. That's so good. And I just keep on thinking about how this training has helped you increase your capacity for leadership.
Yeah,
Because I think for the ministry leaders that are listening, whatever calling they have, because I do want to make sure we speak beyond church planting,
yeah,
is you, even if you don't fail, like how hard would it be to serve at 50% of your capacity your entire life because you're
right.
not willing to be trained and
Yep,
assessed and
yep,
equipped or submit yourself to godly and humble leadership
yep,
with humble just teachability in your life that you have you can increase your capacity for the
yep,
kingdom, and why would we not want that?
absolutely.
So so this core team's going, you're living like missionaries, all these sorts of things are going on. Um, Obviously you still have this history of this previous attempt that
Yep,
it's probably, especially when you're thinking about launching your first service, right? Because
yeah,
you've launched a church before.
yeah.
What are some ways that may have popped up in your head
Oh
or
man,
influenced your soul, everything?
dude, such a good question. And so it actually caused me to be hesitant to launch a service
Wow.
because like so kind of our trajectory was I remember moving to Las Vegas, and we knew we had about a year for residency. And so I was like, cool, I'm good for a year. As we made that turn into the last 6 months, I'm like, oh man, this is about to happen. Like
This
this is
year is
real.
really fast. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, it goes so fast. And so like there's a crossing the Rubicon, and like we're doing this, and so we got past our year, and we kind of we're meeting in our home at this time. And man, we had got to the point to where there was about 40, maybe 50 people meeting in our home
Wow.
between our families and the kids. And it's crazy town. And so we knew though that the time was going to need to come where we had to take the step of, having a public presence. And part of the reason is in Las Vegas, if you invite somebody to your home, they're like, that's weird. They
Mm.
would rather go to a worship service because in a worship service you can show up and kind of be invisible, and that's a Vegas thing.
We kind of
Folks
found
that
that we found that in our community
yeah,
too. Like
100%, man.
during our not to pivot from your story, but yeah, during our core phase when we were meeting in our home for Bible study,
Yep.
and Pam is one of the best cooks you will ever meet.
Yeah,
Jim has benefited from
100%.
Pam's
I
cooking.
can I can attest to that.
Uh,
Yes.
and so like we were feeding people Saturday night, but we'd
Yep.
meet people in the community, and we were growing. Same thing. We had kids in the basement,
Yep.
kids, adults in this corner, and it was
Yep.
awesome.
Yep.
But we would go in the community and we'd be doing like an outreach event. We'd be talking to people, and they would literally be like, "Hey, let us know when you're a real church." Like,
Exactly.
we,
Exactly.
they're like,
Yeah.
"I don't know how I."
Yeah.
Now, I actually think from a missionary standpoint, that's changing. I
Yes.
think that the more de-churched our culture gets and lean toward unchurched or pre-Christian, whatever those languages is,
Hmm.
there's more comfort to have spiritual conversations in a stranger's
Yeah.
home than
That's
sit
fair.
passively in a service. But
Yeah.
but for the sake of your story,
Yeah. Well,
so you need to move on to a new church
well,
to
we,
launch.
we we needed to do something that was public, but there was a hesitancy in me
Yeah.
because of what happened in the past. And so, fortunately, there was another local pastor in the community that was a good friend and a mentor, and he challenged me. He said, Jim, this is your next step as a church, and you cannot put this off.
Hmm.
You've got to take this step. And he said, unless you're concerned that you guys aren't ready, like you don't have the people or you don't have the things needed. And truthfully, there were still deficiencies and gaps that we found, as we went
Yeah.
public. But
You have to work those things out in a
and
public space
that's the
sometimes.
thing. And that, we had reached a point where it's kind of like we all knew, but their leader was a little hesitant to do it. But we just had to do it. And so I remember sharing with our folks and saying, it's time. We've got to put that date on the calendar. We've got to find a place, that sort of thing. And again, the Lord in His kindness opened up a space for us to meet. And so, yeah, Easter, I think it was about a year. It was so we had our residency, and then like another year after that is about the time that we
Wow.
launched. Yeah.
What I think is fun is round one, Jim. You couldn't slow him down.
No, he was like, just give me a pulpit and I'm going to take over the world.
Yeah, let's bring it on,
Yeah, yeah,
Tennessee. And
yep,
then new Jim is like, you're having mentors being like, hey, it's okay. You can
yeah,
launch this. You need
yeah,
like the next step is.
yeah,
So do you think that was out of fear or just out of not feeling ready or a combination of both?
yeah. I think there was definitely some fear there, if I'm honest. Yeah, there was some fear of a past experience and not wanting to see that duplicated, and
Yeah.
I'm sure was playing into that. But there was also a real sense of I don't want to rush this,
Yeah.
and so what I needed to hear, because a lot of the folks in our group in our church were growing in their relationship with the Lord, but we still needed some spiritual maturity from within, and so sometimes I had to go on the outside to get
Mm.
some helpful perspective, and I needed some of those guys to say, "Hey, from what we see, this is your next step as you are on this path, and it looks like it's time." So that was a helpful word and confirmation from those guys.
Gotcha. You know, from a soul care standpoint or from just a spiritual rhythm standpoint, what was different in your own habits with God
Oh man,
this second? We didn't really talk about that in the last episode, but
yeah.
I mean, this healthy thing is like what did you do differently in that regard?
One of the things that as the Lord allowed us to go through this failure, that I learned was God was not nearly as important to me as I thought He was.
Hmm.
And when I went through this failure, just the Lord and His Word and the message of the gospel, it became so precious and such a treasure to me. And the joy of my life that when we navigated into this new season in Las Vegas, just time in the Word, time with His people, it reframed mission. It wasn't evangelism because I wanted to see somebody get baptized. Obviously, we want to celebrate baptism. It's evangelism because if you're not in Christ, your soul is not at rest. Your soul does not experience joy. And even if you come out of a conversation about Jesus hating the gospel, I don't want that for you, but I can live with that for you. But what I cannot live with is you not having the opportunity to hear about the
Mm,
joy that is there in Jesus. And
gotcha.
so I was just God was so kind, and a lot of it came through our healing time in Orlando,
Yeah.
just to put me around brothers that reminded me of how good the gospel is, and let that be my focus. And we were able to carry that over into our time in Vegas.
Wow, that's what a good comment. I love that shift because I think every ministry leader feels that tension of like
Yeah,
we want to see baptisms because we're supposed to see people get baptized
right,
versus man, we need somebody who is a soul facing an eternity away from
dude.
Jesus.
Yeah,
And so like versus just that motivation and it can be hard to spot initially because we're doing the same things.
sure. Yeah,
But the driving force is different. Wow, what a cool
yeah.
difference. And I bet you just being in Vegas in the lostness of that city,
Bro.
you saw it
And
every day.
what we started to see is that not only did Vegas make so much sense for us, it may be the only city that made sense for us to plant
Wow.
in. And we had so many wonderful gospel conversations. We started to see parallels between our time in Orlando and the kind of city Orlando is and the
I
kind of
see
city
that.
Vegas is. And like Vegas is one of those cities that you can move from out of the city, and nobody's from there anyway. So it's not weird that you didn't grow up here.
Hmm.
And so it does allow for connection points and open doors. And so, yeah, if anybody's listening, if you're thinking about planting, I'd put Vegas on your radar, bro. It's a challenging but a beautiful place to plant a church.
I would put Abingdon, Maryland on your
There you
radar
go.
because
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I
no, I
love it.
agree. I totally agree with everything you're saying. So good. Um, I love how it went from like Vegas is a surprise to Vegas is where we needed to be
Yes.
to teach you.
Yeah.
I feel like it just knowing you, God used Vegas to teach you to be the missionary you always wanted to be.
Yeah.
Like
100%. Yeah.
from this
And
hearing your story.
also taught me that I I need people to do this with me. That I don't have it all figured out. I'm not a guru of anything. I'm not some visionary, strategic, whatever. And so I remember I knew that if we don't have somebody who is like our relational connector in our
Mm,
church, that I'm going to be the relational lid for us. And
yeah,
so God connected us with a couple in our church that were so just part and woven into the Vegas community. And we invited them to be part of the core team. Honestly, thought they'd say no, and they agreed to it. And again, our church does not root and thrive without this couple being
mm,
part of it. And so the Lord again was so kind just to say to remind me, this is not about me. This is about the Lord. This is about His glory. And just whatever gifts I've got, I'm going to try to position those and then just try to get anybody and everybody else and get their gifts on board as well.
gotcha. So you launch your service.
Yep.
You eventually pull the trigger. How did things go in that first month? And now I realize that honestly, it's really weird sometimes, especially without like a launchy large or all these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Like we launched with a small core team. Your core
Yep.
team was bigger than ours when you launched, but like it can be like, how did that just help the listeners kind of
Yeah.
finish out the story?
Absolutely. We launched our church service Sunday morning. It was Easter. I want to say 2014. That sounds about right.
Where'd you launch
And
out of? What location?
we had an elementary school
Okay.
that we met in, and yeah, we what we figured out very very quickly is we were going to be the grinder church,
Hmm.
like grinding in the sense of I think there's a website called Grinder.
Sandwiches.
Not that, or not the sandwiches either. But very just blue collar meat and potatoes kind of church.
Yeah.
Like never explosive growth, but just steady over time.
Yep.
And so it went well for us. We learned so many lessons along the way. And one lesson that I learned is um, as much time as I could early on, I just tried to pour into leadership development
Yeah.
and just raise up leaders, raise up leaders, raise up leaders. Um, if I had it to do over again, I would have done even more of that earlier in the process, and just and also too, I would have said I've got to have at least one more elder
Yeah.
ready person with me before I launch. But part of it is sometimes you just got to go with what you got.
Yeah,
You know,
like, and
yeah,
that is true because like I don't want your first story to be like we were never ready, we rushed it because sometimes you just got to go too.
you got
Like
to
there's that
go
tension, like
100%.
we
That's
got to
it.
do this thing and
That's
figure it
it.
out. We felt the
Yeah,
same way. It's funny how
yeah,
our stories are so similar in church planting
yeah.
and in very different communities, but
Well, and
like
sometimes you're like, well, conditions have to be perfect, and then we'll go. It's like, oh, if you're waiting on that, it's never going to happen.
yeah,
It's the old adage: if you wait until you're ready to have kids, you'll never have kids. So, we did it. But
yeah,
yeah, we launched, and by the Lord's grace, we were at the school. I want to say for about 2, maybe 3 years, and then a permanent space opened up for
wow,
us in the community, and so we actually shared that with another church. That church met on Sunday afternoon. We met there on Sunday mornings. So yeah, we just we started to find our spot in the community. Our joke was, we're like the Southwest Airlines of churches. Like, there's no frills.
yep.
We're not going to try to out Vegas, but we're just going to give you the gospel. We're going to give you community and try to send you out on mission.
I love that. Man, it's so similar to our story. We in the first few years, I was like, we're just gonna grind it in the community. I use that word too.
Yep.
We're gonna
Yep.
meet. I was like, I think I would set goals for our team. Like we're gonna knock on 15,000 doors this summer, and we did. Like
Yeah.
with the help of mission teams and
Yes.
teenagers. So
Yes.
not the 20 people that were on our core team, but and then if I had to do it all again, I would really emphasize leadership development
Yeah.
because I just need
No
it.
doubt.
And now that
No doubt.
we're doing that now, and our church is
Yeah.
so much healthier. But
Absolutely.
how cool is that? So you transitioned to eventually you're not the pastor of that church anymore. You live
No.
back in Florida.
Back in Florida. So our story was we were able to, there was another planter being raised up in Vegas. And so we were able to see our people kind of handed over to him, if you will. And yeah, the Lord moved us on to our next chapter of ministry.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah.
Um, to kind of wrap all this up, if you were talking to someone who failed before and was
Mm,
thinking about trying it again,
yeah.
what would you give them from your advice or your leadership principles, whatever you want to frame it as?
Yeah. I'd want to have kind of a two-part conversation or two focused conversation. The first would be the spiritual.
Mm,
I'd want to make sure just how's your soul,
yeah.
and how's your walk with the Lord. What have you learned about God? What have you learned about your relationship with Jesus? How's the gospel become precious to you? Because for me, there was a pretty drastic difference. And if you ask my wife, she'll tell you, like, spiritually, I'm a different man now than I was then. And if that's part of your story, then that is in and of itself enough to rejoice over and be
Wow.
grateful for.
Mm,
But I think that's going to also put you in a posture of how you're processing through this leadership wise. Because I remember for a long time coming out of failure, I would tell people, I feel like the guy who got the ball at the end of the game took the shot and missed. And all I want to do is put 5 more seconds on the clock and get the ball again.
mm.
But again, there was a lot of pride in that. And so God had to get me to a point of saying, whatever you want me to do, Lord, I'm willing to do. And so as you start to process through the leadership part of that, um, as you have grown in your understanding of who God is and how precious the gospel is, has it made you the kind of leader who's willing to do whatever the Lord wants? If so, kind of after that, if there is a stirring of wanting to do it again, then I'd say lean into that, man.
Hmm.
Press into that and rejoice over that and realize that the thing you failed at, you're probably ultimately going to thank God, if not the most for. It's going to be one of the things you thank
Wow.
Him most for, and it's going to shape you and make you a better leader in the future.
What an amazing testimony. And I pray that any ministry leader listening who has failed or has struggled in the past can hear that, like, these struggles and when things just aren't working can be a point of thanksgiving to a good
100%.
God who
Amen.
works in your life. Jim, this has been an awesome conversation. Thanks for your vulnerability and sharing both the way God has shaped you through failure, but just what God has done as you process through his hand in your life. So appreciate you sharing with us. I guess our friend Richard never dropped in. And so don't worry, all you podcast listeners, Richard will be back.
There you
And
go.
so, and Jim, I hope to have you back on with another conversation down the road. So
Happy to,
it's been
man.
fun. And I look forward to the next time we get to really hang out in person, which has been it's been about
It's
a
been
year.
a minute. It's been a minute.
It needs to stop. That needs to
Yes.
change.
We got
So,
to do that. Yes, sir.
yeah, absolutely. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of the Ministry Mix podcast. If you found today's content helpful, we'd love for you to make sure you subscribe, share, whatever you need to do. Maybe there's a ministry leader that you know who is going through a similar situations to Jim, and you just want his testimony to be a point of encouragement. I'd encourage you to pass this on to a ministry leader. If you could, a great gift to us would be if you were to leave a review, whether it's on Spotify or Apple or wherever you're listening to this. Your feedback does all the algorithm magic to push this to other leaders like you. And again, if you got questions, this is a conversation. We'd love to have you be a part of the conversation. What do you want us to talk about? What would you love to be a fly on the wall and listen about? So connect with us on social media. Let us know. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and caring for your soul. Thanks, Jim.
Awesome, bro. Appreciate you, dude.